get out of some of the stuff without having an actual democratic process for how we do foreign policy.
All right. And so lastly, and then we'll go to the phones in a second. We are now less than 30 days away from the Iowa caucus.
Ah, geez.
Yep. And there was a stat that came out the other day. I can't remember which piece this was. That something like 35% of Sanders' anticipated caucus goers are going to the Iowa caucus for the first time. And there was a big piece in BuzzFeed, and there was another one in The Intercept about sort of the organization and the theory that the Sanders campaign is operating under. And the idea is, and I've been saying this for a while, that the proof is going to be in the pudding. Iowa is going to be a very clarifying moment, particularly for the Sanders campaign. And I think depending on what the clarification is there, it's going to have implications, obviously, for the other campaigns. But the question is the Sanders campaign theory that they are going to bring out a new cohort of voters? It's not necessarily younger voters. That's included. But a cohort of voters who have been sitting on the sidelines because they do not think that there's really they agree, broadly speaking, with a center to left perspective, but they are just not motivated to vote because they don't feel like their issues will actually be addressed. And this is the sort of, in some ways, the mirror image of Trump's theory. Can we get xenophobic and racist enough to motivate those people and actually think that, like, hey, I don't like black people, but I'm not seeing anybody in the Republican Party standing up and saying they're really going to stick it to them till Donald Trump comes along. Well,
I don't know how well that worked for him. He got fewer votes than Mitt Romney, but he did try.
He did get fewer votes than Mitt Romney, but there's
anecdotal evidence that some of that worked. Like there's that guy Black, I think is his last name, but he was a young guy who grew up in the Nazi movement. He de-radicalized himself in a really interesting way. I got to look it up. But anyways, his father never voted his whole life until Trump ran. So there are anecdotes like that.
And certainly in the 2018 elections, we saw Republicans vote at a much higher rate than they had in the past. It's just Democrats
There's more Democrats than Republicans.
Yes. And so Sanders is attempting to reach people who have sat on the sidelines, but have been marginally in agreement with, vaguely the Democrats' agenda, but they just didn't really buy it enough. And so one of the things that Sanders is doing this time around is he is platforming the people who ostensibly his campaign, in particular his presidency, would help materially, people who have been ignored in the past. And we've seen this time and time again at these town halls, particularly about healthcare, where Sanders basically gives up the microphone and lets people tell their stories. Here is one of those moments in, I believe was in Grundy Center, Iowa. And a guy, I don't, we just know his name is Ryan, I guess, tells the story of what happened, of basically his life, and where he's at and why he's supporting Sanders. And it's pretty moving.
I just went to the emergency room this last Sunday feeling like I was going to have a heart attack, and I have not had insurance in over 10 years. Our factory down here closed. My wife and I both worked there. We both went back to college, so we both have this mountain of debt, and I wasn't about to, end up leaving her with a ton of medical bills, so I begged and pleaded with the emergency room. I let them do the EKG thing, and then I let them x-ray my lungs to make sure it wasn't pneumonia. But then I told them I would walk out, and they referred me over to a free clinic over in Waterloo. I did get an appointment, but it's humiliating, honestly, Bern. It's humiliating. I felt like when I was a little kid, poor, and I had the different colored lunch card, and all the rich kids would pick on me then, That's exactly how I felt. And I even, when coming home, I was driving a half an hour so that I didn't have to have an ambulance. I called my wife, and she laughed at me hysterically when I said, you fucking tell Bernie, you tell him that your husband died because he couldn't afford to get fixed, because they don't care if the poor drop. They don't care. And we need you.
Thank you. Your first name again?
Ryan.
Ryan. You all hear that? So you're paying for health care for millions of people today. And Ryan, thank you for having the courage to share that. There are people in America who have serious accidents, and when the ambulance comes, they say, do not take me to the hospital because I don't want to go bankrupt. How insane is that? Okay, we lose 30,000 people a year because when they get sick, they can't afford to go to the doctor. And by the time they walk in, their situation is terminal.
So aside from that being, pretty moving, the idea is that there are people out there who are seeing their experience reflected in a national platform for the first time, and it makes them believe that that they're going to have there's going to be some type of material response to their needs, and it's going to motivate people. And we will know at least part of the answer as to whether that's been effective in less than 30 days.
And by the way, I think it was Eric Levitz who wrote an article about this. You spoke with him recently. The politics and the policies that motivate non-voters are not that different than the ones that motivate swing voters, which kind of puts the lie to the idea that you need to move to the center on things like healthcare in order to win.
Right. And I think there's also been, shown just in terms of polarization, just because, people have a knee-jerk, basically, filter. If I vote, I'm only going to vote this way. Then the question becomes, if I vote, and there's a lot of people, this is the theory, who will see that clip or a clip like that or a moment like that, and they would never go out and vote for a Republican, but they would also in the past say, there's no point in me voting for the Democrat because they say they feel my pain, but I don't really believe that they do. But when they see basically the limelight, the resources being dedicated, which is, that's what we just saw. What we just saw was very small, but it's an example of it that you don't normally see. Like that microphone, that forum, there's a certain amount of power there. And that power is being ceded and given to that man to tell their story. And that, there's in addition to it having an actual value for the country and for, the population so that these voices can be heard. It has a value in terms of driving out other votes and inspiring other people. I mean, on some level, it's an extension of social media. But it is the difference is that you're actually seeing a politician cede that power voluntarily, share that power. And we'll see if that works.
And this is an issue that unites every working class person in this country. Previous elections, liberal pundits ask, why are they voting against their own interests? They have the clearest chance to vote for their own interests. We all do. That we've had in a long, long time. I mean, people see it around them every day, just people dying because they don't have health care. And that really should not be a partisan thing.